So, good evening to everyone. My name is Maria Gavriatopoulou. For most of you that you are not Greek, it's just Maria, because my surname is extremely difficult. So it's a great honor for me that you have me here. Usually, us, the physicians, talk a lot, and we do not hear always the patients. The previous session was very interesting. For me, it was another place for whatever you do within the support from one patient to another, amazing. And today we're going to discuss for what is coming next in the future of WM. I'm so happy to be here with Steve, but I haven't seen him for a long time. So, why clinical trials are extremely important for patients with Waldenstrom's, but for patients with malignancies, hematological malignancies in total. Especially for Waldenstrom's, you all know that you have a very rare disease. So for these diseases, it's very difficult to design clinical trials due to the rarity of the underlying disease, and therefore it's very difficult to gain approvals. But we know that in order to have many, many drugs for you, so that we can make you live longer, we need novel drugs and novel compounds. So it is very important to find ways to design clinical trials, enroll patients in these clinical trials, and of course, gain new approvals, first of all, for you. So clinical trials are the bridge between scientific discovery and patient care. You know that all drugs require at least a phase 2 or a phase 3 clinical trial in order for the authorities to provide an FDA and an EMA approval. They are rigorous, they are very strict on the way that they are designed and on the way that they are conducted. But, however, it is the only way, the cornerstone, in order to gain novel treatment compounds and novel compounds approvals. And of course, we need more effective treatments. I heard that you mentioned functional cure for Waldenstrom's. So in order to achieve functional cure, definitely we need more treatments, more effective, and of course, less toxic. Because it's not only that we need you to be in remission, but we need you to live your life the best way you can, with quality of life, and continue all your activities like you do not have Waldenstrom's. That's the main goal. So, every approved treatment for Waldenstrom's until now has been part of a clinical trial design, or, especially for Waldenstrom's, we use some drugs that were approved in the setting of non-Hodgkin lymphoma, low grade, because although Waldenstrom's is a bit different, it's a clear entirety different from NHL, low grade. However, we use with an extrapolation several drugs like rituximab, like cyclo, like dexamethasone, extrapolated from the data that we have for low-grade lymphomas. So, we have 4 different types of clinical trials. Initially, after a drug has shown efficacy in the translational research level, I mean in the lab, we need first of all the phase 1 clinical trial to evaluate what? Only the safety. We need to find out whether this compound that it did was very effective in cells, cancer cells, or even animal models, that it is safe for patients as well. So we design and conduct phase 1 clinical trials, and the main goal is to find the MTD, which is the maximum tolerated dose. So if we find that this new compound is safe, and we also identify the maximum tolerated dose, and we see that there is an efficacy signal there, then we need to design a phase 2 clinical trial. And in this context, we evaluate 2 different things, efficacy and safety. So we need to know in a bigger population of patients whether the drug is effective. And of course, we always evaluate safety as well. So these phase 2 studies usually enroll a small patient group, 50 patients, 70 patients, 8 patients, compared to phase 1, where we only enroll 15 patients, 20, 25. And again, if we identify that the drug or the treatment regimen is very effective in phase 2 trials, then we go on with phase 3 trials. These are the landmark for clinical trials because these are considered as the ones that actually will gain the approval. They are called approval trials because they compare the new drug or the new regimen with the standard of care. Whatever the standard of care is considered the most suitable at a specific time point for the specific subset of patients at a specific time point of the disease course. Meaning we design other trials for newly diagnosed patients, other trials for relapsed refractory patients, and other trials for patients, for example, that have received all available therapeutic options. So, clinical trials, phase 3, with a comparator arm in order to gain approval compared to the standard of care. And finally, if we reach our goal, so to have a new drug available for all of you, then there are also the phase 4 clinical trials that are considered as post-marketing after the drug is approved, that mainly their goal, the drug is prescribed in this setting, is available for our patients and we can prescribe it. However, we need to evaluate long-term toxicity because we know that several drugs that are used in hematology and oncology probably after a few years might cause adverse events like myelodysplasia, etc. So these studies mainly focus on long-term toxicity and toxicity in general. So, for you, how can you navigate trials confidently? This, first of all, depends on the law of each country. Because, for example, in Greece, we are not allowed to advertise our clinical trial program. So, we can inform our patients or the patients that will eventually come to our site for an opinion or for follow-up or for treatment, but we are not allowed, for example, to use our clinic site, our department site, or even the Hematologic Society site to advertise for clinical trials. And this, especially in Greece, is a significant barrier because we want to inform our patients, but it's not very easy based on the Greek law. So you need, first of all, to find out your options. And as you already mentioned in the previous conversation, it is very important to know which physicians are the ones that are mainly involved in this disease. Because it is not like you are going to underestimate another physician. However, it is important to find a physician that is involved in a very rare disease, that knows the disease, knows how to treat the disease, knows to identify the disease, and of course is academically involved, if possible, in the research of this specific, very rare disease. So you need to know your options. Of course, usually the first physician that might identify that there is an underlying disorder is a GP, most probably, or a neurologist, as you already mentioned, or another physician. However, you need to find out which physicians are mostly involved, and then you need to be advised whether there are any clinical trials available. And someone might claim, why should I be enrolled in a clinical trial? There are too many reasons. I will explain it further on. The main reason is that you are given the opportunity to receive a novel compound that most probably will be effective and will be available after 5, 6, 7 years. And of course, you help each other because once you are part of a clinical trial, actually you help other patients in other countries that do not have the opportunity to be enrolled in a clinical trial, since you give them the opportunity in some years from now to be able to gain such a treatment. So, you need to ask your doctor what clinical trials are available, and you need to get a specific plan of the design of the study, meaning which is the standard arm, which is the expected efficacy, what is the expected toxicity? How often should I visit the site? Because we all know that especially for fixed duration treatment, that I'm very fond of, you need to visit your site every 3 or 4 weeks. For clinical trials, however, especially in the beginning of the treatment, you need to visit very often the site, every week or every 2 weeks, because we also assess other things apart from efficacy and toxicity. We assess pharmacokinetics of the drug, pharmacodynamics of the drug. There is a significant amount of blood sampling for these reasons. So it is very important to know exactly the design, the program, and what you should expect from being enrolled in this clinical trial. And of course, always ask your doctor, what are your alternatives? Because you need to know what are all the potential treatment options, what is the expected efficacy of each one, and then decide by yourself and your caregivers and your family whether you want to be enrolled in this clinical trial or not. And of course, your toolkit, of course, the advocacy groups, the patient groups, the support groups, that one might tell to the other, there is a great clinical trial with this drug, go there and ask for advice whether you can be enrolled or not, trial navigators, and of course, I always tell this to my patients as well, if you feel uncomfortable or if you feel that you want to know whether you have done everything for your health and your disease, go ask for a second opinion. And tell your doctor, we shouldn't feel, and this is for the physician's point of view, we shouldn't feel bad if a patient says that I want to ask for a second opinion. It's absolutely normal. Most probably we would do the same for ourselves. So inform your physician, make the physician feel comfortable, and ask for a second opinion if you feel that you want to do so. And why is it so important to have clinical trials? Because, as already mentioned, are the cornerstone for medical research and progress. The participation, as I already mentioned, gives you the opportunity to receive novel treatment compounds very early. And of course, you help yourself as well as the entire community. Now, the cornerstone of treatment currently for Waldenstrom's are chemoimmunotherapy as well as BTK inhibitors. However, it seems that currently in hematologic malignancies, we're moving beyond chemoimmunotherapy, we're moving beyond targeted therapy, and several different treatment options are currently under investigation. And what is the main idea? That we want compounds that target only the specific cell, the Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia cell exclusively, and therefore, most probably, will have a different toxicity profile since all your healthy cells will not be affected. And we have two main categories, the T-cell engagers and CAR T-cells. The T-cell engagers that are called otherwise bispecific antibodies are actually what their name says, bispecific. They grab your healthy immune T-cells from one hand and the WM cancer cells from the other, two different epitopes, and they bring the cancer cell with your normal T-cell very close. And this enables your immunity system, your body, to fight the cancer. So they actually have a dual activity on the cancer cell. Since they have an epitope binding on this epitope on the cancer cell, they can kill the cell, but they also bring the T cells to fight the cell as well, the cancer cell as well. And same idea, CAR T-cell therapy, I think that all of you most probably will have heard of that. Your own T-cells again, your own immune cells, are sent to a specific lab and they become soldiers in order to recognize only Waldenstrom cancer cells. And then you get them back in your body and they start to fight the cancer directly. So these are two novel therapeutic options currently under investigation, not only for Waldenstrom's, but for other hematological malignancies as well, with the same idea and the same concept, trying to exploit the maximum of your immune system to fight directly the cancer. So, what does this mean for you? Most probably, it means very deep remissions. And these treatment options actually act very rapidly. So, if you have increased tumor burden and excessive symptoms, this means that if you get such an effective treatment, most probably you will very fast relieved because the symptoms will go away and you will experience a deep response. And of course, especially for CAR T, that it's a single infusion, just a single infusion, this means that most probably, if you respond, you might remain in deep remissions for a very prolonged time period. And we still need to take into consideration that many of you, although BTK inhibitors are well tolerated and we now know to manage toxicity and are oral treatments, still they don't like the idea of being on a treatment forever, every day, until disease progression, and this might come after 10 or 15 years. So for many of you, it's a significant barrier, continuous treatment, and you might prefer a fixed duration treatment and then stop. So these are several different treatment compounds that are currently under investigation for patients with Waldenstrom's. You can see that mainly they are evaluated in relapse refractory setting because this is how it goes in clinical trials. We first try each drug in the relapse refractory setting where our therapeutic options are much less, and then if a treatment proves to be very, very effective with manageable toxicity, we might think to evaluate it as well in first line of treatment in newly diagnosed patients. And again, I highlight this because I think that this is the most important thing that might, persuade you that you should be enrolled in a clinical trial. You will get new drugs that are available currently only in this context. And you will get it first and you will get it early. And of course, keep in mind that physicians that conduct clinical trials are very well educated. They have conducted several trials. They can manage all your side effects. They know exactly how it goes. And sometimes what I usually say to my patients is that there might be a burden, logistic burden mainly, for many admissions at the hospital. But again, the tests are more, the monitoring is better, you visit your physician very often, so sometimes this might be good as well. So there are many new compounds, as you saw, where still most of these trials are recruiting. We still have to wait and see the results and how these drugs will be incorporated in our armamentarium later on. However, because we shouldn't say only the good, the advantages, but the disadvantages as well. Bispecifics as well as CAR Ts have also a specific toxicity profile, meaning cytopenias, meaning that especially for bispecifics, the first time period at the ramp-up dosing, and for CAR T, you need to be hospitalized. They can cause cytokine release syndrome that needs to be managed in a specific way. They can cause severe immunosuppression. Most of our patients might experience infections, etc. So it is a significant treatment option. I think that we are going to have available such drugs in the future. However, we need to individualize treatment, find the most appropriate treatment for the most appropriate patient at the specific time point of the disease course. So, to summarize, the landscape of Waldenstrom, fortunately for all of us, is rapidly evolving and expanding, and this is also reflected to the overall survival rates of our patients. It is true, and we know it with mathematics, that our patients with Waldenström's live longer now. We have available treatment options. However, it seems that the clinical trials are the ones that are going to be our gateway to the newest innovations. Of course, the introduction of Bruton kinase inhibitors revolutionized treatment strategies. However, there are many things for us, the physicians, to solve. For example, even with the BTK use, still we have not achieved deep remissions, for example. However, this does not seem to affect our patients' quality of life, our patients' progression-free survival, our patients' overall survival. And of course, you need to talk to your physician, you need to talk to your doctor. I think that you should choose a physician that is close to you, and most importantly, that you feel trust to discuss everything. And in this context, for me, I believe, and I think for all physicians that are in the room, it is very important to exploit all the available treatment options in order for you to be well, to stay in remission, and live as much as you can. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention.